I would like to begin by acknowledging the support and feedback we received from members of the Timorese civil society, media, development professionals and advisors, parliamentarians, and the larger community in consulting with us and giving us feedback on the internet freedoms issue in Timor-Leste. Before I begin, I would also like to inform everyone present that today's event would also be simultaneously interpreted in Tetum. Before I go into the actual report launch, I would now like to invite the Executive Director of Asia Center, Dr. Robin Ramcharan, to provide some brief opening remarks. Dr. Ramcharan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James. Perhaps my camera could be turned on. I'm not able to do so from my end. As we wait for that, I would also like to welcome everyone to this very interesting and important event. Forgive me for speaking to you from the dark, so to speak. Let me just make a few introductory remarks. As Dr. Gomez was saying, we have been doing this research on the freedom of expression in Southeast Asia over the last few years. And this report was done with the support of the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law in Washington, to whom we are grateful. And so we are grateful to them. Yes, there we are, thank you. So we are grateful to them and to other partners who have collaborated. So this is part of Asia Center's continuing work on freedom of expression. And so it is very fitting that we have this particular seminar with our distinguished speakers, Nukila, Marta, Adilson, and of course, Dr. James Gomez from the Asia Center. On July 14, this is France's National Day, France's Day of the remembrance, commemoration of the start of its Republican phase of its governance system, the end of absolutism, the end of a deeply conservative, absolutist society. And one thing for today's event, one thing to note is the role of media and journalism, the role of media in sustaining the French Revolution. And overnight, almost immediately after the revolution started, France went from about 4 or 5 publications to more than 1,600 publications of all kinds. And these are publications giving opinions of critiques by various people, critiquing the old aristocracy, critiquing the old regime, critiquing the monarchic system, right? So we note that opinion-based journalism started, bulletins, posters, pamphlets. 200 years later, more than 200 years later, here we are discussing Timor-Leste in the larger Southeast Asia context, where you have not only opinion-based journalism, you have professional institutional journalism, and then you have social media environment where the ordinary citizen and blogger can engage in journalism, citizen journalism, okay? And it is in that context, of the internet and social media environment that we discuss journalism, internet freedoms in East Timor today. So I welcome all our panelists and all our participants, and hope to have a very enriching discussion today about how we can calibrate, best adjust the laws that are emerging in East Timor to deal with this new internet environment. So let me stop there and turn it back to Dr. Gomez. And thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramcharan, for the opening remark, reminding us of the significance of 14th July and in the context of, freedom of expression. I will now proceed by stating that the publication of the report is a start of a conversation that has already been going about internet freedoms in Timor-Leste. We hope the publication of the report will be a step in beginning further constructive dialogue for a free internet environment. With that remarks, I'll just proceed on to the next slide, where we invite you to follow us on our various handles on social media, and these links will be now sent to you via the chat room. Next, just some brief webinar guidelines. If I may have the next slide. Participants will be muted on entry, video permanently disabled. Please feel free anytime to send your questions through the Q&A function, or raise hand during the Q&A session, and look out for updates in the chat box from Asia Center. In discussing Timor-Leste, I think it's important to look into the context of the regional trends, because we can't look any country around the world or in the region in isolation. And I think there are two regional trends that we need to keep in mind. One is generally the freedom rankings. Where does Timor-Leste stands, and where does it intend to go? Secondly, I think it's also, and this is less discussed, but increasingly more significant, is the geopolitics behind the ownership of the communication infrastructure. So in the battle for dominance over global narratives, especially around values, that impact issues of freedom of expression and human rights, who is the owner, or who are we allowing to own our communication infrastructure, because that is also something that impacts freedoms. So once again, to celebrate the very good and unique position in freedom rankings of Timor, I would like to remind our audiences, Timor continues to rank very, very highly, right at the top for academic freedoms in the region, Southeast Asia, press freedoms in the region, in Southeast Asia. And although formally Timor-Leste is not recorded in the Internet Freedom Index, it nevertheless, by extension and by reputation, is seen to enjoy a free space online compared to its regional neighbors. I will now share with you in terms of internet penetration, where Timor stands vis-a-vis the region. Timor is number 10 in the sense that it's 45.1% of its population are currently able to access the internet, and over 33% are accessing social media. Again, this has to be seen in the context of the region, and there is, a fair ways for Timor-Leste to increase its presence online. A quick deep dive into the numbers within the country. So we have seen, in spite of what we know has to be challenges in the access to the internet and the cost of the internet, we have seen year on year, access to the internet has been progressing pretty well in spite of the constraints. A huge constraint continues to be the cost of the internet. Timor, in comparison to Southeast Asia, pays something like $25 US for 10 gigabyte of data use. And even though its gross national product is per capita is very, very low compared to the rest of the region. A quick, overview on the next slide, which shows us the telecommunication ownership. Again, the figures are a bit dated, which need to be, improved upon. But this is just to give you an indication of the market share of the various telecom companies, and I'll circle back in the discussion further on. Now to the heart of the matter, the report. The report is now available. We will shortly share with you the link through the chat group so you can download the report. This is how the report looks inside. We have an introduction that looks at the background, and our special reference is adherence to international human rights standards. We look at the various national laws and how they impact and could possibly impact internet freedoms. And finally, a discussion on the nuances and the pressure points where freedoms are affected, and finally, some key recommendations. So for a quick snapshot, I'll present you the dashboard of draft laws. The criminal defamation law that has been, raised and articulated in 2020, and then this year, the cybercrime law. And we do not have, the details of the data privacy and protection law, but we know that this has been announced and work is progressing. More discussion of these laws are definitely, well covered in the report, and we encourage you to sort of dig into the report. But just on the top line, just a quick zoom in on the penalties for criminal defamation. Should it be passed, it's on the backstop now. That will be 3 years imprisonment and a fine of up to $10,000 US. The cybercrime bill, which was not too long ago discussed or presented in Parliament, has imprisonment of up to 6 years and a fine of up to 200 days, depending on the offense. The data privacy and protection law, we are still waiting for the announcements as discussions are still ongoing. We also have a look next at the media law, which has been in discussion for a while, and challenges again to highlight the fines of up to $1,500 US for the violation of journalist duties, and a fine of up to $2,500 to $10,000 for non-compliance for requests of right of reply. Once again, I'll move now to the infrastructure. We have issues of poor connectivity. We have also, experienced this during the course of drafting the report, given that, travels are not possible and a lot of the discussion had to take place online, and, it's always a challenge connecting up with friends in Timor-Leste, especially, when they go deeper into the country. Access to data, internet data continues to be expensive, and I've showed you, where in the regional context Timor-Leste's costings stand, and of course the geopolitics of connectivity. Here, I will draw a little, comparison to developments in Myanmar and Cambodia. and who owns internet companies, who are the service providers, does play a part in how the laws, no matter how well they are principled and passed, and how they are actually used. And finally, still on, Timor's internet infrastructure, you are seeing a different slide at the moment. It tends to be, concentrated in city capitals. Not unusual to Timor. It's also similar in many parts of Southeast Asia. The urban people tend to be better served in terms of internet infrastructure. I'll now quickly do a short dive into the different draft laws that the report examines and just give you a very top line. The concerns around criminal defamation, we see, there are, instances of public rebuke directed at people who criticize community and political leaders, including government officials. We see the law can be applied to criminalize free speech. And we have, evidence and we have examples that we have cited in the report. Often we have also relied on the work of local groups that have documented these instances. And we also seen other laws that may be used for the purposes of, criminalizing those who criticize, government officials and political leaders. Another concern would be around the cybercrime bill. The ease of receiving approvals to conduct investigations, concern about misuse of data for the surveillance of critics, and lack of protection to whistleblowers. Again, it's important to see this in context of what's happening in Southeast Asia. Some jurisdictions call it cybercrime, some jurisdiction, label it as cybersecurity. Again, just looking at developments in the region, pointing out to Myanmar, we have seen, one of the early moves following the February coup was actually to introduce a form of a cybersecurity bill. The main intentions of it was actually to surveil and monitor critics of the military junta. So moving along, just broad concerns of the data privacy and protection law, with the caveat that the law is not yet available. And this is really based on a discussion and the goodwill and cooperation of our friends in the development sector, the professionals and advisors. We note that there are good principles in terms of ensuring, data privacy can be protected. From what we have, conversed with our dialogue partners, there are, plans to have oversight committees, and these are all welcome. But to generate, conversations obviously around the law when there's more information publicly available. We've also received feedback that there are concerns around understanding privacy implication due to the lack of, good digital literacy, and also some concern about the lack of voluntary consent for data collection, as well as possible misuse later down the track. Here, I think, again, we fall back to the learned behavior in the region, where promises of data privacy are then rescinded once the laws come into operation, and the politics of power comes into play, and with an additional caveat of who owns the internet infrastructure and how willing are they to cooperate to surveil and share content captured online. We also note the undesirable online behaviors Critics have been intimidated by public officials after claims of defamation. Please look at the report for specific examples. We have also received feedback, and I believe one of our speakers will touch on this issue about sexual harassment of women and girls that pushes them away from the internet as more and more people get online, and also the risk that a clear and present risk that government-owned media may also push for favorable narrative, and a lot of that will also happen online, as we have seen throughout the region. So I'm coming to the end of the report, and I will just dip down on some of the key recommendations. We recommend, and this is consistent with the pushback and other articulation by civil society and friends in the media about repealing Section 285 of the Criminal Defamation of the Penal Code, and to withdraw the draft criminal law altogether, and or use other provisions in the media law and also the civil code to ensure there's quality journalism and address concerns of genuine harm to reputation. For the cybercrime law, we ask for more clarity, especially for whistleblowers, because they are exposing information that is of public interest, and also those who may accidentally, access data with no willful intention of misuse. So these are also, articulated in our recommendation. And for the data privacy and protection law, with the caveat that the law is not publicly available at the moment, but we want to express that, we welcome the oversight committee, articulated in principle, but from experience and the observation of behaviors around the region, the challenge has always been how independent the body would be and how it will behave, and the political interference post-legislation. So I think that's where we need to keep the eye on, and also similarly to sharpen the language around provisions in the media law in a way to minimize risks to the work of the journalists. A final set of recommendations would be around, ensuring, and this is often repeated, that Timor, as best as it can, be diligent in submitting its reports to the ICCPR. We know there are challenges of resources and other issues, but we still, would recommend to keep the, eye on the ball. And also for the Office of the Providor, the National Human Rights Institution also can contribute and have a sharper focus on issue of internet freedoms. We note that the UPR, the third cycle for Timor-Leste, is coming upon us. In fact, the last day for stakeholder submissions to the UPR is tomorrow, and Asia Center will be submitting, drawing from this report to Timor's UPR process in a constructive and effective manner. Last but not least, we want to recognize the need of the special position of civil society to act as a watchdog on all the moving parts related to issues that affect internet freedom. I'm happy to, answer questions and dive down a little bit later during the Q&A. But I encourage you also to look at the report. Once again, the report is a conversation starter, and we position it in a manner where we want to have a constructive dialogue to ensure we have a good and free internet landscape. With that, I'll end here and invite our first respondent, Ms. Nukila Evanty. Nukila Evanty is Executive Director of the Women's Working Group based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you, Nukila, for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, James. Thank you so much for this opportunity to give some insight reaction for Asia Center report, Timor-Leste, Internet freedoms under threat. So from the gender lens, I would like to mention about gender lens. In every country, also in Timor-Leste, girls and women have faced discrimination, sexual violence, physical violence, stigma, and major inequalities in education, health, social welfare, political participation, and justice. Many of these disparities between men and women have been perpetuated online, also in these pandemic times. It's still relevant to observe the report from the National Commission, Human Rights Institution, Proveedoria dos Direitos Humanos e Justiça, or PDHG, to Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, in 2017, regarding the obstacles to internet access faced by women in Timor-Leste on the basis of Resolution 3213 of the Human Rights Council on the promotion, protection, and enjoyment of human rights on the internet. Yes, as mentioned in the report, the key challenge to realizing internet freedom in Timor-Leste has been telecommunication infrastructure. Infrastructure, as mentioned, cable connection are limited, particularly at rural area, are unstable, and access is quite expensive. Correct me if I'm wrong, the cost for the internet is around $1 until $5 for 1 hour and for unlimited data. Also, there are 3 internet providers, Telkomsel, TT or Timor Telkom, and Telemor. The majority of the rural population, particularly women, they could not afford the smartphone or mobile phone, or because they live in areas without coverage of the internet network. I've been in Atambua before in 2017, and I observed by myself the situation in Timor-Leste. And men are more likely to have jobs, and those are more likely to be able to afford to buy a mobile phone, in particular the type of phone that has internet functionality. Interestingly, women based on my small research with my colleagues from DTP alumni, women are more active on social media, particularly women activists compared to men. It is interesting to note that overwhelming majority of Facebook, Instagram user in Timor-Leste are female. Particularly in this pandemic situation, the internet access is important for online learning, digital marketing, for micro and small medium enterprises who are mostly are women. And for women activists and journalists for doing their advocacy and facilitation for their client or their respondent. I would like to highlight also about, because in the report mentioning about the draft law, to highlight also about the stages of the draft law, such as criminal defamation law and cybercrime, which these 2 draft laws or bill initiated, maybe initiated by Ministry of Justice or relevant ministries, or by the Timor-Leste National Parliament. This draft bill or draft laws should be passed by various stages. Correct me if I'm wrong. The National Parliament of Timor-Leste comprises of 22 women MPs, out of 60 male MPs. This is very interesting because about the composition of the women and men, yeah, in this national parliament. Also, I believe these debatable laws need some process, yeah, before agreed by the president. They will be discussed in the parliament with various stakeholders such as academia, NGOs, non-governmental organization. I believe Timor-Leste has a strong civil society organization because Timor-Leste has ratified 7 core United Nations Human Rights Covenants, not to include CRPD or Convention on the Right of Person with Disabilities, and the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. So it is interesting to include later about the process of the discussion of the draft law in Parliament and practical action, how to build capacity for women rights in their human rights activism. With their access to internet, their access to online participation, women involvement in public and political life will be raised. So, however, for women to take full advantage of the benefit of the internet and communication technologies, barriers such as inequality of access and technology-related violence against women must be eliminated. So this is all my notes regarding women access, yeah, to internet in Timor-Leste. Thank you. Over to you, James.
Yeah, thank you, Nukila, for extending the discussion and highlighting the women's role and the impact of internet freedom, and also pointing out that special data on parliamentarians and also possible intervention through that avenue, which is very important as we engage with stakeholders. So once again, thank you very much. Kindly, Nukila Evanty, Executive Director of the Women's Working Group.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to invite Marta Da Silva. Marta is a researcher at Hamutuk, an NGO that has, contributed extensively on the ground to the debates and pushing the envelope or seeking clarity on various, incursions into the internet freedoms. So I will now invite Marta to speak. She will speak in Tetum. And so for those friends in the call, please access the translation feature and select English if you would like to see to hear Marta input translated. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Marta.
Thank you, James. I will be speaking in Tetun, my comment about your report. So let me speak in Tetun.
Please.
Ya, Husin Hamutuk, ami aprecia relatori ida husi Asia Center, no oportunidade atau halo discussão com a liberdade internet. Liberdade internet, sai parte usitanya luta atau hameting, direito básico, anessa liberdade, expressão no informação, no direito bafeto no moslabari, no promove diálogo social nebe portelio. Ya relatori Asia Centernya observa kata, diferença entre regime legislativo no doméstico, inclui standar internacional, cria lacuna e nebe belhamosu violação de direitos humanos. Nomos encoraja media sira atau censura siraniaan rasi, wenhira sira halo publikação sira ia media sosial. Ami concorda kata, Convenção no lei internacional, por exemplo, dia, quando há direito digital no liberdade de expressão e a Timor-Leste. Mas, mudança para regime legislativo mesa, que label assegura liberdade. Também taharai kata durante tinang ruanul lah Hamutuk observa, do julmento lei foi bara que setor oi. Esforço atu cria lei no regulamento da rumah, mas intenção nebe dia. Mas realidade mak dalam rumah laja implementação nebe forte. Atu dehan kata komunikasi publik menus, dalam rumah tradução balian tetung mas menus, dalam rumah mos autoridade rasik bel haluan regras nebe sira kreationa. Atau dan ami considera kata kelakuna nebe ami considera nudar parte dan nebe dalam rumah buat nebe ladun dia publicação lei sirane durante ne. Ita precisa considera kata promulgação lei nebe nudar etapa ida det nebe processo nebe naru. Tamnya kita harus consider etapa ida det nebe processo naru nebe labele remata momento presidente republika promulga lei da ne. Atau dia kata gua hira ihana promulgação, implementação no socialização lei mos da rumah sai susar, se bem hira conteúdo lei nebe susar, ba povo atu compreende. Da rumah lei ho português, onya lia fuang nebe da rumah dificuldade ba povo atu compreende, e tenemos sai susar gua hira processo socialização. Antau ita hanoin kata, precisa ia comunicação nebe bele razoável tebes, no povo bele compreende sai nama kita cara kato basira no processo nebe sira hola parte processo ne. Direito digital buat nebe phone ya Timor-Leste. No banhira ita hanoin kata cria lei phone atu protege população usia exploração digital no estabelece proteção ba privacidade. Precisa consideramos o sama mecanismo efetivo atu comunica lei ne ba povo. Tambah usia Amerika kata mayoria povo Timor-Leste hela area rural barat liu compara ho ya capital. Sira por volta 70% ou 70% nebe hela ya area de remote ya município sira compara hela ya diliantau dal rumah acesso internet mas sai susari da ya Timor-Leste. Assunto nemos mosu nudar buat nebe te precisa resolve a tempo tirmai. Por exemplo, ya bulan fevereiro tinang ne, la Hamutuk katonya preocupação ba governo quando ba plano introduz sistema ID único, nebeti apresenta ona ya Conselho Ministro. La Hamutuk katonya preocupação quando ba governo nya plano introduz sistema net ho rajaun kata an saudiang. Povo bara spesifik ya rural. Sira rasik sira pia conhecimento dia quando balia fuang no conceito técnico no jurídico sira nebe sai base ba implementar o sistema ID único. Siranya direito ba privacidade dan consentimento voluntário sira tem que retam proteção. Então essa a hira implementação lei buat sira ne hotu precisamos ia socialização nebe forte para o itabele o hira implementa ia compreensão dia quando o discutanya povo. Ia lei kona ba assunto técnico, mas a tendência a poder lia fong senebe usi li fong português mo da rumah a fraco li tang. Mas ami hare kata persija desenvolve vocabulário lia tetung kona ba direito digital. No hahu introduce vocabulário sene li usi escola, li usi companhia telemóvel sira, no telecomunicação sira, no parceiro de desenvolvimento sira. Sugesta sugestão que datang nebe ami nebe mai usi relatori asia centernya mak atu cria imposto ka levi usi companhia marila sira ne idea da nebe interessante atu evita aumenta toda ba governo nebe ita kunista kata ya recurso nebe limitado mas be ya Timor-Leste ya companhia media sosial sira menos no mecanismo atu colecta imposto usi companhia ya rai liur nesse susar. Karik balik considera possibilidade atau obrigação ba companhia sira. Seluk nebe hetang lucro si sektor komunikasi. Laos social media day. Atau faham informação quando ba direito no dever e espaço online contribui fundo ba socialização direito ka foti ação seluk nebe atau faham todan ba companhia sira label fotodan ba governo de. Espaço online por poder ba companhia sira atau hetang lucro bot. no sira precisa participar e esforço atu ha menos risco no promove internet no dar espaço ida atu aprende no faz dias ho liberdade. Nune ami hanoin katak iha media sosial sira persija iha censura balu liliu ami considera katak fotografia ga considera pornografia ga halok asesinato hanesan oho ema ga animal de jase trafico nebe condição grave liu para bele evita trauma serne buat sira nebe la merece atu publica ya social media pidulos yang censura nebe bele controla katak video o fotografia nebe merece no nebe la merece tem sire klasifikasi mengira ita publikan usi publikan neba media sira ita meliu si hahalok sire nebe ita bel combate hahalok sire nebe asalto seksual asuru feto no labarik o bullying o media sosial o hoax telemenu sire nebe leona ita belihan atu belduga provinsa atu halo redução ba hahalok sira ne amirasik anisang ong itabotnya apresentação amirasik la concorda ho mudança código penal ba criminalidade defamação desteulu kami Yesus pisang kata kami la concorda tambah tuir la Hamutuk wanghira leine se praku demokrasia no bilação internasional sira no konstitusi RDT sira no husi leine rasik se prevene pouco discussão atau assunto importante ao cidadão sira selu. No for lembra fali ba ami ba durante ocupação Indonesia nia. Ne ami hanon katak ami ia ami nia lo Hamutuk rasik la concorda ho lei defamação ne ia início queras incluímos ia lei nebe agora ia parlamento cybercrime tambah ia fulan Junior la Hamutuk masakare karta bal parlamento ami molok sira hau diskutu la Hamutuk kakare karta aberta ida ba presidente parlamento no ami husu atu lori proposta plenaria durante tempo emergência katak la husu presidente par la bele halo plenaria ba proposta lei cybercrime ne tambah lei ne precisa participação máximo a participação clean husi povo husi sociedade civil anta wangira discutir lei ne e tempo ne be mahotu bele acesso ou mahotu bele participação para wangira nia promulgação e implementação ne hetang participação no máximo por itu bele promove igualdade promove justiça no problema paz ya itanya larang o liberdade expressão no informação serne obrigada ba ita bot reten back to you James thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta, for your intervention, highlighting, some of the recommendations on the report, and also, reminding us of the good work Hamutuk has done way ahead before this report on key issues, including, your interventions around the defamation law. So once again, thank you, Marta, and also Hamutuk for being there for all of us. Next, I would like to invite Adilson da Costa Junior, who's the Strategic and Engagement Lead at Oxfam Timor-Leste. I would also like to acknowledge the close, support and collaboration in terms of feedback we have received on the report, and also to acknowledge Oxfam's support in providing, and arranging for the Tetum translation for this event, and also our previous event. So Adilson, the floor is yours, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to Asia Center for organizing this really critical report in related to the internet freedom under threat in Timor-Leste. So I have been seeing a few key recommendations that I think it's relevant for Timor-Leste in terms of internet freedoms and also freedoms of media and so Oxfam's role in Timor-Leste in the last 2-3 years back, we have been on transition to changing our role to be more in influencing programs. We have been supporting civil societies in Timor-Leste to engage and participating in a policy advocacy and influencing government policies, particularly for the specific laws that we think could be to undermine democracy or shrinking civic space in this country. I could just give an example for since the defamation law was bring to the public by the Minister of Justice in 2020. Oxfam has been facilitating academics, civil societies, including Hamutuk and other civil society human rights defenders, and also other CSOs in Timor-Leste to discuss about this defamation law and how its impact to the civic space and human rights issues in the country. And we are really appreciate because in Timor-Leste, even the government start to produce some critical draft law that not really support to the freedom of expression and media freedom in Timor-Leste. But one thing is that it's really positive in the process of our engagement is the government are still open to get insight, to get more ideas from public as well as civil societies and academics and other peoples in the country. So I think in 2001, it has been really successful story for the civil societies in Timor-Leste when the President of Republic was also concerned about this criminalizing defamation laws that finally was stopped and not passed in this process in a Council of Ministers. But in fact, in 2001, when the public prosecutor was introduced the new cyber law, it also bring a lot of discussions among TSOs and human rights defender in Timor-Leste, including ombudsman. Oxfam was organizing few webinar discussion about these laws and how this law was given an impact for civic space and also journalism freedom to do the work in these democratic countries. And I think it was really interesting because even the law was, it's pushed in by the general prosecutor, and currently it was in a parliament national, but it's still not being discussed because there has been many critics that came around the civil societies and other governments, policymakers, that concern about this draft laws process because this draft law was come up during the COVID-19 restrictions and also state emergency period. So there has been like a challenging for people to engage or participating more in this public consultation about this cyber law. And there has been few consultation that made by the National Parliament. They will invite few media institutions in Timor-Leste to engage or participated in the draft laws consultation, but it is not really enough to make conclusions that this draft law can pass in a parliament. So there is still ongoing how people in Timor-Leste, I mean like TSOs and other academic institutions and also media, they have to push and bring it, encourage the parliaments to make more open public consultations that bring people to participate and give their opinions, their ideas, while if the law is in process. Because in fact, we understand that this draft law was really contradict with the international international conventions that Timor-Leste has ratified, like ICCPR and other convention as CEDAW. So we think that Oxfam rules in Timor-Leste was keep giving space and also supporting civil societies in Timor-Leste to be more active and participate in a policy influencing process to change the narrative that how about this cybercrime law process in the country. So there is also a few things that I know from your recommendation. In some specific provision, it could be in process to changes, but it was needed time and also persistency of civil societies in Timor-Leste to push and keep informed to the policymakers that the provisions that included in this any specific laws that like cyber crime laws could give an effect and a negative impact to internet freedoms and also media freedoms in a country. So we are thinking that there are a few laws, that draft laws that are still ongoing and still not make a huge, I mean, public consultation in Timor-Leste need to be, need to be more open to get more feedback or ideas from civil societies and also human rights defenders and many other interest groups that it finally can affect by this implementation law. So here in Timor-Leste, I think it's true that lack of infrastructure and then it's really high cost to access to internet, and mostly social media could be space for people in Timor-Leste to proposing ideas or discussing the political dynamics that happen in the countries, but unfortunately, it was only in a daily basis. People who are living in a countryside or in a municipalities, sometimes they are lack of information, lack of access to data or any specific draft laws that proposing by the government or from parliament. So I'm concerned that if the draft laws that produced by the government or parliament will not really representing people's needs, and the content of this law itself is not really well socialized, people didn't understand what the content of this law, then it will be like a big challenges, and it could be undermine democracy and also shrinking in civic space in this country. And one other things that I also want to share is in our societies here, even out of the system, there is a narrative that the resistance people who are fighting for an independence still have like a big power, still have a power to dominate in this process. So it has to be considered that informal powers that exist still have a big influence to the systems that currently exist in our government. So I think that's some of my ideas that I would like to share with you, but I believe that the role of civil societies, media, women groups, and other organizations in Timor-Leste could be part of this process, and they can make changes to influence in those specific laws that became challenging in this country. So I think that's all for my side. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Adilson. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Adilson da Costa Junior, Strategic and Engagement Lead for Oxfam in Timor-Leste. Adilson, in particular, highlighted the need for consultation, broader consultation, especially with stakeholders in the community. This was also something, brought to attention by Nukila when she talked about the process of law formulation. And then we, of course, heard from Marta, who gave us some vivid examples of Lau Hamutuk's intervention in the process, with a special mention of their work related to the defamation law. So with that, we are now open for conversations. I will just check into our Q&A function. I think we had, so I'll read out the first question, and also there was a hand up earlier. So the first question is from Simon. Simon asks, what about penalties for defaming public figures under a civil code rather than criminal law? Can I maybe ask, Adilson, perhaps, if you have a response, and also Marta or Nukila, if you have some views. Perhaps, Adilson, I could start with you. But perhaps, while we wait for reactions.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Adilson. Yeah.
Sorry, I lose the your voice. I can't hear. My internet is down. Then
No problem. Yeah, the question will also be copy and pasted into the chat group, so you can see it. The question asks, what are the penalties for defamation and in the civil code, and can that be used rather than the criminal law?
So yeah, I think that's a broader attentions that we made. I mean, like Oxfam in Timor-Leste, we have been supporting our partners and coalitions who are concerned about this defamation law. The penalty of defamation criminal, I mean, like defamation was already regulated in our civil code. So we don't need to criminalize defamation that made by any societies, civil societies, or people who are probably critics for any policymakers or governments in related to the policies or the decisions that not really reflect or respond to the people needs. So whether pushing the civil code that exists to regulate it, the defamation law, the defamations that happen in our societies, while the government tried to use the way to criminalize peoples, to criminalize defamations in this the draft new defamation law. So I think from Oxfam's perspective, in the advocacy work that we did in the last year in 2020, we are one of the recommendations that from the civil societies made is keep using the existing laws that already regulated the case that related to defamations, not to criminalize peoples with defamation, with the new defamation law. So that's, I think, the ideas that I would say, because one important things that introducing in the new criminalized defamation law was giving more chance to the policymakers or the people who has a power to control, and also limited people to critics or to protest any policy that not really giving benefit for the public or for any communities that they serve. So I think that's only my ideas, but my colleagues from Hamutuk might add something, or yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Adilson, for the input. I'll just wait to see if there's any intervention. Otherwise, Marta, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. From Hamutuk, ami hanuin katak defamação né la precisa muda ba código penal nia ia código processo civil de amanen katak la precisa muda tamba ia meu seluk ne batu processaga akere kona ia alegação civil inclui procedimento nebe qualtelar susciti masuk emane ba daruma hare artigo barat ia código civil ia artigo começa usi 67 to 68, Ne kata além de ne se ema ia falsima ka halocation lolos ba autoridade sira ema ga alegado crimine ia na artigo 285 si Código Penal debe considera atu refere atu ne usi crime debe hanaran denúncio caluniza. Namos amirasi ia na lei comunicação social mos preve mekanismo ingoi atu hamate notícia nebe hakanek emania ondra atu protege publicação notícia por defendean. Ia media sosial rasik mos ia mekanismo ingoi atu halo denúncio bahira postagem ga ida viola ema seluknya direito ho linguagem tolok o seluk tang. Tambane ami hanoin kata la precisa iho na Código Penal mai be ia Código Civil mos garanti ona kata prosesa nebe ita bele tui ruang hira marasik sinti defama ga sinti publicação nebe defamanya direito. Tamon oi na odia ngona kata ia esbosu lene se amate demokrasia mos se takamos oportunidade ba ami yang sudah di civil sira atu ia discussão na cloque gatu ia sugestão gatu nebe ba público no ami hanoin kata oi hira maida nia considera ou nia simu cargo politik nia tem ser consideramos kata nia ia dever no ia direito nia tem ser simu mos kata oi hira ia kritika usi povo nebe nia lidera ba ne konsekuensi ida se ema baru la simu ida ne dia nia label himul dalam ba politika ili dalam seluk de processo sini ami hanen katak ne mudar usi parte de direitos humanos nemos usi parte participação pública o sabe hadia gestão ne ba oi ne be lao dia kiu ami consider katak ia nação demokrasia ida precisa ia comunicação ne be dia entre usi parte governante nomos usi povo para a comunicação de satu hadia processo ne be dia kiu ne be lao justo liu no povo sai beneficiário usi processo serane tamane lama tu nafati ami akara foto usi processa defamação lau tu Código Civil nebe ia ona la precisa aumenta tang ba Código Civil tambane contra direitos humanos contra a Constituição nomos contra tratado internacional sira nebe hare kona ba liberdade de expressão ou liberdade de informação. Obrigada. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Marta, for your input and once again, highlighting the need for conversation and consultation with regard to the legal process. We have a couple of questions on law. Nukila, I'm going to direct this to you because you are also a legal scholar. The questions are from Dr. Noi Noi from Myanmar, and he's with us in the webinar. He has a two-part question. Essentially, he's asking, first of all, can we on our own as people, instead of law, kind of use ethical practices, to manage these issues, right? One. And the second question is more about international law. Or should the UN draft an overarching, sort of guideline law on this matter, right? I assume here we are talking about internet freedom, so ensuring that, it's in compliance with ensuring internet freedoms, and then kind of enforce it uniformly. I'm sure you have views on that, Nukila. So again, to repeat the two-part question, can we abandon law and just operate on ethics, essentially, which is sort of self-monitoring, self-regulation, or should we think about the UN drafting some kind of overarching law to be enforced uniformly across all nations? These are big questions, and over to you, perhaps from a jurisprudence point of view, your thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you, James. I would like to answer Dr. Nyonyo questions in general. I would like to answer in general like this. For the elements of to impose criminal law, we have some heavy elements, to fulfill if someone should be punished or not based on criminal law. So the elements, for instance, like defamation. Defamation is one should be deliberately attacks the honor of reputation of a person by accusing and committing an act. So this the heavy element to be proved in the trial process or in the process of for the evidence, and it should be proven the real intention to make the accusation known to the public. For so this we should be proof the one person is conducted insult to the another person. So the element is this is the element what we call element of in criminal law that but for the case about ethics, ethics is about from my perspective is about the prevention, yeah, preventions guideline guideline before one action, one criminal action committed, yeah. So this ethic can be drafted by one institution to guide and to avoid any criminal acts to be committed. So this is so for the reality, yeah, in some countries like my country Indonesia. So the elements of crime should be proven. It's very difficult also to prove, yeah, regarding defamations and other similar crimes. So it needs some evidence as well, documentations, etc. that should be proceed into the trial or in the court. For your question about the ethic is for ethic. If there is no elements of crime, we can put in the ethics code from one institution, like let's say from journalist association or a civil society organization. They can produce an ethic code for their members, for instance. But for the criminal law, it should be regulated for public knowledge. Yeah. So this is, I think, my general my answer to. I hope it can be answered the question from Dr. Nyonyo. James.
Yeah, thank you, Nukila. That was one part of the question. Dr. Noino also had a second part on the UN draft law, but I'll come back to that later, Dr. Noino. Thank you for your question. I'll move on to the next question by Ariel. This question will now be posted on the chat function, and I'll direct the question once again to briefly to Adilson as well as Marta. The question asks, what do you think? Do you think the defamation law will be passed into law, even though it's currently parked? And who are the likely targets of this law once passed? So again, I'll just start off with Adilson, and then after that followed by Marta. Adilson, floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, this is, I think everyone understands law is a political product, right? We understand this draft law that I think Oxfam was engaged supporting with other civil societies in Timor-Leste and other coalitions that critics to this draft law. And it's finally, this draft law was not passed in a Council of Ministers. And the discussions that we made with some political elites and also Oxfam partners did with the president and also with Minister of Justice, because he's the owner of this draft law. He was saying that this is not a priority. Means it could be possible will be present again, maybe not this year or maybe next year. It's depend on who will run this government. So it's of course the law is not passed in a Council of Ministers, and it's not really like a priority for the government, as what the Minister of Justice also saying, as well as the President of the Republic also saying in the past. But it possibly could be pushed if there is any political agenda that behind this draft law. And who is the target of this law? Of course, all the people in Timor-Leste. It's not only media, it's not only civil societies, but it's all will affect with this law if the law are being approved and promulgated by the parliament, and it will be applied for everyone in the country. So the problem is we are questioning what is the content, how it respects the human rights issues, how it the content of this law is giving more space, promoting civic space or shrinking civic space or undermining democracy in this country. That's the problem. So I think initially when the civil societies in Timor-Leste, academics and other human rights defenders protest this law, that's because of the content of this law is really contradict with our constitutions and also the international conventions, particularly ICCPR, the Convention of International Convention of Civil and Political Rights that we have ratified in the last 15 years or 16 years in 2003. That's be a critical things that I think Oxfam and also other civil societies concerned during the government proposing this draft law. So that's only my suggestions, my ideas that I would like to share with colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Adilson. Marta, could you please kindly weigh in on this question? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. Hanesang balu Adilson explica una kata ka usile narasi ke rumah kontra itanya kudiku tratado internacional no constituição no buat tidak seluk nambah sama studian kata usi lei nebe atau diang kata ne langsung Adilson ne kata ne postpone nya bele ba tempo yang hira sira sinti karaksia bele luri ne ba Conselho Ministro submete ba parlamento no ami observamos iha meu sidamos sira bele hatama artigo balu liusi lei cybercrime ga cibernetiku nebe agora iha parlamento hela ami hare katak dalam rumah sira la baho dani anto sira koko atu encaixa ba lei artigo sira balu iha itanya lei iha esboso lei cibernetiku neida se kole kono batar jetu hansa oing Adilson kole terjetu ba emahotu katak lei no ami hare katak lei ne se for beneficiary liu, se for keuntungan, se for beneficiary, baukung nain sira. no se for target ba povo no comunidade sira. Ami hari kata konsekuensi saida mak bele mosu se lei dane a prova dunia se tabot ne perguntas kora ba target tu. Anto ami hari kata esbosu lei ne ameaça povo hotu. Anto in colega sertiang mos particularmente ba ema vulnerável sira. Nebe laya conexão no laya suporta finansial. Também lei ne bele taka dalang liu ba emak bit like sira. Oferta sigirak nebe ya experiência de relação com assédio sexual. No prevene sira atu hakere ka kolia saiha media laho evidência. Por exemplo, caso nebe agora ema diskuti los ya itanya rai. Por exemplo, caso pedofilia ekusi. Hodi lori RD gari cepat ba tribunal. Se proposta lei dan ema kepasa antau ex-padre Ricardo Aspat ne RD ne dia bele prejudica fali vítima sira uja proposta lei defamação ne antau lei ne bele descoraja ema ne vulnerável ou anesam feto labarik ema bit like sira atau avança no lori siranya alegado ne ba tribunal tambah lei defamação sira ne ko pressão basira no ami hanoi datang kata proposta lei ne descoraja ema balu atu polia sai crime rumah ya publiku hodi protesta lei ne itare kata kia artigo ida ulu artigo 187 ka aku sida walunulu hitu sila explica kata sentença prisão tinang ne bele dobrada ka triplicada o dala tolu se targetu se defamação ne ka insulta funcionário ka figura público no liu si media ka media social turla Hamutuk kami hari kata itane perigoso tedes tambah começa a mata liberdade emani Hanoi. Atu exige no expressa siranya Hanoi ou livre. Por exemplo, se ema rumah punya opinião, temi, hakere kahusu perguntas ba publica de ham. Por exemplo, nessa caso ulu. Ngedian senhor ministra Emilia Pires halo kometa korupsão. Será que lebe expressão opinião se hetang prisão tambahnya expressa ninya Hanoi kora baidane kau tambah hari kata ni dia saya merumah hati tembak publika ka usa media sosial temnya kerek artigo rumah dia haluk idane la dia ka haluk ne hanisa regime Soeharto o insa responsable ba ema sirane anto itare kata lakuna susi esbosu leni kata lafo pating nebe dia kalau liberdade nebe dia ba comunidade o povo Timor-Leste itare kan Timor-Leste sida promulga lei dan nebe efetivo o ita diam wet blows ka ema rumah ka agensi rumah o nebel inelaus jurnalista ema sira nebe saisasi ba krimi da acontece agensi larang ka posai krimi embalu sendiri rusi agensi jurnalista ga au se NGO sira ga pulne selutam ne por exemplo ema selu posai caso korupsão balu insulta estado lalu antau ita kersija proteção atau dalang o atau insa ema sira nebe la foto emi siranya narang ne belhetan proteção mas vamos tem que for proteção basasi vai menebe identifica particularmente para eman hatere kata when hira etan diskriminação ka ameaça siranya moris se for siranya perigo basiranya emprego tu atau lakon certifica ka lakon promoção tamba pública antau sirare kata kita ne hansan mas que sirate ne kata ne prática corrupção ne be contra mas be sirarasi layak bid atu fohatene ba público ba emane be merece sira fohatene tamba lei defamação ne ataka te espaço basira antau la muito deve ser importante de proteção ser ne importante pa lei sirene de la segura kata ko espaço ne be dia ba comunidade ba ema hotu bele expressa siranya Hanoi tur dalam demokrasia ma além de usia esboço galene além de for ameaça ba media no ema balu ele sai prevene ba organização social civil hansa na audiência la Hamutuk ne be envolve discussão pacífico sira lidera la rumah ami temi kata companhia idane halo korupsão na kosang miliar halo idane será que da rumah usi temi sene ami halo ga bahira se ami atene kata ukunan sira politik sira sente kata sira halo perigoso ba povo nia moris no gastago halo sasan sira latunya dalam hira amela protesta kata obrigação tem que ser taumatan ba investimento sira nebe bele for beneficiário ba povo ami sinti kata kira ne bele diang kata ne kontra de nebe dal rumah bele mos lori estado ga lori narang estado par diang kata seda mami halo ne kontra bot sira nebe tirolos la merece. Tambani hansa la hamut kamaning kata se itahare kata kes bosune se ia ona contradicto tratado internacional itu konstitusi kita lei media sosial sida ami sinti kata la precisa ba avanza no precisa ia lei nebe bele acumulatif bele overall tu emanya direto no dever nudar sida dau no nudar povo ia raidane. Obrigada. Thanks. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Marta, for diving down and articulating very clearly the at-risk profile of groups and persons that may be harmed by this law. The last time we had the town hall consultation a couple of months back, we noticed in a straw poll conducted with participants, most people felt that the law will eventually be passed. I think it was an interesting observation there also from our speakers earlier in response to the question that perhaps some of the clauses may be smuggled into perhaps the cybercrime law, which is also a technique some regimes in Southeast Asia do. When they receive a backlash of a particular law, they come up with another law and then they work in some of the provisions. Time is almost upon us. So I'll spend the last couple of minutes just wrapping up and thanking all contributors to this event. Before that, one of my colleagues will send you a very, very short survey. We appreciate your feedback on the event to help us improve on the event. I will thank the speakers in the reverse order of their presentation. Adilson da Costa Junior, Strategic and Engagement Lead from Oxfam Timor-Leste. I also want to recognize Oxfam's support in arranging and supporting the simultaneous translation. And thank you very much to Hector Hill for being with us twice over now and for your patient hard work. Marta Da Silva, researcher at Hamutuk and colleagues at Hamutuk with whom we have been in conversation. Thank you very much for the hard work that you are doing on the ground and active intervention in this area. Nukila Evanty, Executive Director, Women's Working Group, thank you for your legal analysis and the special spotlight you placed on the impact on women and young girls. And would like to also recognize our partners, ICNL, an international NGO based in Washington with whom we are partnering on the report. I would like to thank all the journalists, civil society members, parliamentarians, development professionals and advisors who are very generous with their time and very frank with their views and sharing of information. The report very much, once again, is a discussion document for us to have constructive dialogue on issues related to internet freedoms. And thank you very much for that. I will just wrap up to share with you a last couple of slides, so you have some context in terms of the work we do. Firstly, it's our reports. We have two reports, one on Myanmar that we've just launched on 1st July. This report has been very well received and doing its rounds globally on internet freedoms. We have a next report coming up on Cambodia that will be launched sometime early to mid-August. I encourage friends in Timor-Leste to have some reference to what's happening in the region. So that also better informs in terms of strategies related to advocating for internet freedoms and also having some kind of comparative view on how the laws are rolled out, as well as the tricks of the trade, so to speak, that is being employed in other jurisdictions because ultimately when Timor-Leste becomes part of ASEAN, it will be joining a very, very authoritarian heavy grouping. And there are risks that come with this, because authoritarian regimes, you know, they cultivate and they sometimes turn you as well. So with that, I want to say our final goodbyes. Once again, you know, we appreciate your support in filling out the questionnaire so that we can better improve our presentation next time. We look forward to continuous feedback. If it have not been possible for you to speak or raise a question, feel free to send us an email or reach out to us. We look forward always to have dialogue and improve the inputs we bring to conversations. So with that, I once again thank you very, very much from all of us here at Asia Center. There are a few other people in the room, so I'll just kind of zoom out and let you also have a look at the team who has been working hard to bring the report as well as providing the technical support for this event. So from all of us here in Bangkok, Thailand, Sawadee Krap.
Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.